It was a chilly Friday night, and my friends and I had gathered for a sleepover at my house. We decided to tell scary stories to set the mood. I began with a tale I had heard about a haunted doll. A few years ago, a family moved into an old Victorian house in our town. The house had a history shrouded in mystery, but they didn't pay much heed to the local tales. They were thrilled about their new home, which was full of old-world charm. In the attic of this house, they discovered a dusty, antique doll with porcelain skin, glassy blue eyes, and a pristine Victorian dress. They thought it was a charming addition to their home, an emblem of the house's history. They placed it in the living room, overlooking the family's daily activities. But soon, strange things began happening. At first, it was subtle. They would hear faint giggles and whispers, always seemingly coming from downstairs, especially when they were in the attic. Objects began to move on their own, shifting mysteriously overnight. Lights flickered inexplicably. One evening, the mother was alone in the house, working on her laptop in the dimly lit living room. As she typed away, she heard a soft, eerie voice whispering her name. Startled, she looked around but found no one. She tried to ignore it, attributing it to her imagination. But the voice persisted. This time it came from the doll, which was still sitting on the shelf. Its eyes were glowing malevolent red. She couldn't believe her eyes as the doll whispered, "Play with me." Frozen with fear, she stared at the doll. In a barely audible whisper, she replied, "What do you want?" The doll's lips curled into a sinister smile and it whispered, "Your soul." She screamed and threw the doll across the room, but it defied the laws of physics, landing back on her bed, still whispering and repeating its eerie request. The mother grabbed her keys and fled the house, leaving the doll behind. The family couldn't take it any longer. They decided to move out and left the doll locked in the attic. To this day, if you listen closely on quiet nights, you can hear the eerie laughter and whispers of the haunted doll still waiting for someone to come and play. As I finished the story, my friends and I couldn't help but shiver. The atmosphere in the room had become palpably colder. We laughed it off, but none of us dared to venture into the attic for the rest of the night. The tale of the haunted doll had left an indelible mark on our imaginations. It was a moonless night, and my friends and I were huddled in our sleeping bags, eager to hear the next scary story. I decided to share a chilling tale about a haunted house that my cousin had told me about. In a quiet, secluded part of town stood an abandoned mansion. Locals said it was haunted, but no one dared to enter. It had been vacant for years, left to the elements, and the once beautiful structure had begun to crumble. Legend had it that the ghost of a former owner still roamed the halls, his footsteps echoing through the empty rooms. The story was the stuff of nightmares, and it sent shivers down our spines as we sat around the campfire. One summer, a group of teenagers decided to spend the night in the mansion to prove that the rumors were just superstition. As they settled in, the wind outside howled, making the old house creak and groan. The setting was eerie enough to make even the bravest among them uneasy. Suddenly, they heard it, the unmistakable sound of footsteps, slow and deliberate, echoing through the dark corridors. At first, they dismissed it as their imagination, but the footsteps grew louder and more distinct, impossible to ignore. Terrified, they turned on their flashlights and followed the eerie footsteps. The sound led them deeper into the mansion, and the air grew colder with each step. It was as if the very walls held a sinister secret. Just when they thought they had lost the phantom, they entered a dusty library, and the footsteps abruptly stopped. In the dim light of their flashlights, they saw an old journal on a dusty shelf. As they opened it, They read about a man who had once lived in the mansion, obsessed with collecting rare books. He had died in the library, and his ghost had never left. Panicking, the teenagers tried to flee, but the door slammed shut, trapping them inside. The ghostly footsteps surrounded them, growing louder and more menacing. Desperation set in as they frantically searched for an escape route, but the mansion seemed to have a will of its own. Hours turned into a night that felt like an eternity. They never found a way out, and their fate remained a mystery. The mansion had claimed them, just as it had claimed its previous owner. As I finished the story, we all jumped at the sound of a branch tapping against the window. We laughed nervously, but none of us wanted to venture outside to investigate. The tale of the phantom footsteps had cast a lingering sense of dread over our campsite, making us acutely aware of the darkness that surrounded us. As the night grew darker, I decided to share an even more elaborate story about a sleepover gone terribly wrong. One summer, my friends and I embarked on a camping trip deep into the heart of the forest. We set up our tents by a serene lake surrounded by dense trees. It was the perfect setting for a spooky story, and flickering campfires served as the backdrop for the tale. On the second night of our camping adventure, as we sat around the campfire, I began to tell the harrowing story of a girl who had gone camping with her friends, just like us. They had ventured into the very same woods, seeking an escape from the bustling world. The group had set up their tents, gathered firewood, and started a roaring campfire. They roasted marshmallows, shared ghost stories, and enjoyed the camaraderie of the wilderness. The night was calm and clear, with a blanket of stars above. As the hours passed, the fire crackled and the laughter echoed through the woods. The night air was filled with the pleasant scent of pine trees. But like all good things, their joyous night came to an end, and it was time to retire to their tents. One of the girls, let's call her Emily, felt the call of nature and decided to go into the woods to answer it. She grabbed a flashlight, announced her intention to her friends, and ventured into the darkness, leaving her companions behind. It was a typical situation, and her friends thought nothing of it. However, as minutes turned into hours, Emily didn't return. Her friends grew worried and began calling out for her. The echoes of their voices filled the forest, but there was no response. Anxiety gnawed at them as they realized that something was wrong. They searched the woods tirelessly, shouting her name and scanning the trees with their flashlights, but there was no trace of their missing friend. Panic set in, and the group gathered around the campfire, their faces etched with fear and confusion. As the night wore on, they made a tough decision to seek help. They called the park rangers, who arrived at the campsite with flashlights and search dogs. They initiated a thorough search operation, combing through the forest, the lake's edge, and every nook and cranny. Days turned into weeks, and Emily was never found. The news sent shockwaves through the small town and beyond. Flyers were posted, rewards were offered, but it was as if Emily had vanished into thin air. Years later, another group of campers decided to spend a night by the same serene lake. They built a campfire, shared stories, and reveled in the beauty of the natural surroundings. But as the night grew darker, they reported hearing faint cries for help coming from the woods near the lake. Curiosity got the better of them, and they followed the sound, their flashlights cutting through the darkness. What they stumbled upon sent shivers down their spines. A tattered tent hidden among the trees. Inside, they found a journal with Emily's name on it. The journal told a horrifying story. Emily had gone into the woods that night just as she had done before, but instead of returning to her friends, she had encountered something sinister. The journal entries grew increasingly frantic, detailing her fear of being pursued by an unseen presence. The final entry simply read, "It found me." As I finished the story, we all glanced nervously into the darkness beyond the campfire's glow. The rustling leaves and distant sounds of the forest seemed more eerie than before, and the thought of a friend disappearing into the woods weighed heavily on our minds. We huddled together, vowing not to wander too far from camp that night, knowing that the woods held secrets that were better left undisturbed. And that's a wrap for today's video, folks. I hope you enjoyed watching as much as I enjoyed making it. If you found this video entertaining, please don't forget to give it a thumbs up by hitting that like button down below. Your support really means the world to me. And for more content like this, make sure to subscribe to my channel by clicking the subscribe button right here. That way you'll never miss any of my future uploads. Thank you again for being part of this amazing community. Your support keeps me going, and I can't wait to share more content with you. Until next time, take care and stay awesome.